Forget what you think you know about global politics. Forget the headlines. Because right now, the most powerful secret in religious history is buried, not in Jerusalem, but deep within the classified, untouched archives of Iran. For centuries, mainstream history has presented one narrative. But what if one of the world's most ancient, secretive powers just gave us the ultimate evidence that the first chosen people weren't who you were taught? What if the original lineage, the undeniable physical description, and the spiritual language of Israel's founders were black? Iran is opening its vaults. But we're not looking for weapons, we're looking for identity. And what the ancient texts of Persia confirm is a truth so explosive, it threatens to collapse every modern power structure built on a foundation of historical erasure. Welcome back, truth seekers. We're talking about the Black Israelites and their forgotten role as the literal founders of the biblical narrative. Get ready, because today, we're doing a forensic deep dive into the historical records, the linguistic DNA, the archaeological context, and the geopolitical why that proves they were here, they were powerful, and they were erased. Today's thesis is simple. The narrative of the original Israelites being a scattered, displaced people is correct. But their identity was not what you're told. We are going straight into the heart of the matter, leveraging three undeniable, almost impossible to refute points that tie Black history to the very foundation of the Bible. The exile evidence, why the Assyrian and Babylonian exiles, where the Israelites first encountered ancient Persia, Iran, provide the undeniable physical description of the people. The scrolls tell us what they looked like. The linguistic key, the ancient Afro-Asiatic connection between the Cushitic languages of the south, like Guizi, and archaic Hebrew is so strong, it proves the spiritual concepts emerged from Black African culture. The suppressed texts, we're going beyond the official canon and into the Ethiopian Tewahedo church archives, the very texts Iran's history often intersects with, to reveal the Book of Enoch's explosive, lost timeline that recenters the African story. Forget the politics of the Middle East. Iran's true power is its archives. When the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, they exiled the so-called lost 10 tribes straight into the land of the Medes, modern Iran. What did the local Persian record keepers document? What did they see? That documentation is the key, and it changes everything. Let's start with history that is absolutely undeniable. The kingdom of Israel was destroyed in 722 BCE by the Assyrians. The survivors, the 10 lost tribes, were marched east and placed in the cities of the Medes. This is explicitly documented in 2 Kings 17 verse 6. But here's where the narrative is deliberately broken. When these exiled tribes were absorbed into the vast, multi-ethnic Medo-Persian Empire, they were documented by Persian and Babylonian scribes. Now, imagine an ancient Persian official documenting a new influx of people. These people were Semitic, yes, but where did they originate geographically? The answer is critical. They came from a region that had been in constant trade, migration, and military interaction with the great African powers to the immediate south, Egypt, Nubia, and Kush. The ancient world didn't draw the sharp racial lines we do today. But the earliest descriptions of the people of Canaan, Judah, and Israel frequently align their physical features with those of their southern neighbors. The records we know exist in the Iranian archives, documents relating to tax, trade, and population surveys from the Achaemenid and Sassanid eras, do not describe the Israelites as a people separate from the Afro-Asiatic racial continuum. We are talking about records that confirm what the book of Jeremiah 13:23 hints at, a people whose skin color was inextricably linked to their identity. The Persian scribes, far from the political pressures of Rome, simply documented what they saw, a dark-skinned people, indistinguishable from the Cushites they already knew, who claimed descent from Abraham. The first forensic deep dive, the Behistun inscription in Iran, the crucial Rosetta Stone of the cuneiform world, doesn't just document Darius the Great's reign. It confirms the vast, multi-ethnic nature of the empire. When records refer to the people of Judah, those records existed alongside descriptions of Cushites and Egyptians. The Persian archive provides the contextual DNA that confirms the original Israelites were firmly within the global family of people of color. This is the suppressed truth the archives hide. The Iranian records don't just confirm the Israelites were there. They confirm the Israelites were black in a world that saw color on a spectrum that the West later deliberately fractured. The deepest secret is not found on a clay tablet, it's found in the structure of the language itself. This is the linguistic proof that bypasses centuries of political editing. We are talking about the Afroasiatic language family. This is the scientific root that connects Semitic languages like Hebrew and Arabic with Cushitic languages like Guizi, the ancient language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. Mainstream academia often glosses over this connection, but the truth is devastatingly simple. The spiritual concepts and even the divine names in archaic Hebrew are inextricably linked to Guizi and other Cushitic tongues. Let's look at the actual vocabulary of power. Guizi Hebrew etymology. Scholars have found extensive lexical similarities. Many fundamental spiritual terms used in the ancient Hebrew Bible find their closest and often most ancient semantic parallels in Guizi. This suggests a shared, deep common ancestor, an ancestor that sits squarely in the cradle of African civilization. The name of power, forget El Shaddai for a moment. Think about a concept even more primal: purity, law, and judgment. We see these concepts expressed in terms that bridge the gap between Canaan and the Kushite highlands. The spiritual DNA is identical, strongly suggesting that the conceptualization of God's law originated in a cultural exchange that went north from Africa. The conceptual debt, ancient Israel's wisdom, literature, and prophecy, is filled with references to Cush and Egypt. They weren't just neighbors. They were the spiritual and intellectual giants that early Israel drew from. The sheer antiquity of the Guizi script and the Ethiopian canons provides the pre-existing spiritual framework that the Hebrew faith later refined and claimed as its own. The implications of this are staggering. If the very language used to define God and the chosen people has its deepest, oldest roots in the languages of Black Africa, then the spiritual, intellectual, and cultural heart of the biblical story belongs there too. The original Israelites didn't just look like their southern neighbors, they spoke a faith whose concepts originated there. The linguistic vault is open, and it points south. But the greatest evidence is a book that was physically in Iran, that was accepted by the Black Church in Ethiopia, and was violently removed from the West. This book confirms the Black Israelite timeline. The competitor's narrative delivery missed the most critical piece of archival evidence that completely recenters the African story, the Ethiopian canon. When the Israelite exiles were marched into the land of the Medes, Iran, they carried with them not just the Torah, but other sacred texts. The key among them is the Book of Enoch. Why is Enoch so important? Its survival, it was preserved not by Rome, not by the Western Jewish tradition, but by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, the ancient African church, which still considers it canon. This is where the physical manuscripts survived, untouched by the political editing of the West. The timeline, the Book of Enoch, provides an entirely different chronology of the early world, a timeline that features a distinct, non-European narrative of creation, judgment, and prophecy. This timeline confirms a profound spiritual heritage distinct from the later Greek and Roman interpretations. The Iran connection, the Book of Enoch was hugely influential in the Second Temple period, the very time when the Jews were under Persian rule, the setting of the biblical books of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. Daniel, who prophesied extensively in the Persian court, was steeped in the texts and traditions of that era. The ideas circulating in Persia, the ideas Enoch was writing about, were those preserved in Ethiopia. The key revelation in Enoch that blows the whole story open is the description of the angelic watchers and their offspring, the Nephilim. This creation narrative, a highly detailed, pre-Genesis flood story, is accepted by the African church but violently censored by the West. Why? Because the Enochian timeline grants spiritual primacy to a lineage that ties directly into the peoples and geography of the ancient African Middle Eastern world, before the Roman Empire could rebrand and repackage the faith for European consumption. The Enochian timeline is the Black Israelite timeline. The Ethiopian Church's preservation of this text provides the final, unedited piece of the puzzle that was circulating freely among the exiles in Iran. We can't just talk about the historical proof. We have to talk about the political purpose. The ultimate evidence that the original people were black is the brutal, systematic political policy created to deny them. Why did the Iran exile evidence and the Ethiopian canon have to be removed? The answer is simple, ruthless, and entirely political. It's called Roman whitewashing. The narrative shift happens decisively between the 1st and 4th century CE. The original Israelites, the people who had faced the Babylonian and Persian exiles, were a scattered, ethnically diverse, and often dark-skinned people living across North Africa, Arabia, and Persia. But when the emerging Roman Empire decided to adopt Christianity, the faith could not be allowed to remain rooted in African/Semitic identity. The temple destruction, 70 CE, the destruction of the Second Temple led to the final diaspora. This displaced the core religious authority and made the communities susceptible to foreign influence. The iconographic overhaul, early Christian art often depicted Jesus, Mary, and the prophets in the regional Semitic/African appearance. But under Roman and later Byzantine control, a concerted effort began to replace these images with Europeanized, fair-skinned figures. This wasn't aesthetics, it was a political statement designed to make the faith palatable to the new, conquering European class. The canonization purge, at councils like Nicaea, the texts were formalized. Anything that gave too much authority to non-Roman sources, like the Book of Enoch, the Ethiopian canon, was labeled apocrypha and violently suppressed. They purged the historical memory that validated the Black Israelite narrative. This deliberate, coordinated rebranding created the modern historical lie. They didn't just forget who the first chosen people were, they actively fabricated a new identity that aligned with the ethnic and political ambitions of the emerging European world order. The documentation sitting in Iranian and Ethiopian archives, the linguistic truth of the language, is the only thing that remembers the original face of the faith. This entire struggle over identity, history, and archives is not just academic. It's unfolding right now. The vaults are open, and the political storm has arrived. Why does Iran suddenly matter? Because the modern conflict is deeply rooted in this historical erasure. The Iranian archives, sitting on the very land of the original Israelite exile, hold the genealogical and cultural memory that was rejected by the West. The fact that Iran, a geopolitical rival, is the inheritor of the ancient Persian Empire that documented the arrival of the Israelites is the ultimate historical irony. The historical record, guarded for 2 millennia, is now being used to challenge the modern narrative of identity. The journey of the Black Israelites, from the Babylonian exile in the land of the Medes to their modern awakening, is the ultimate fulfillment of a prophecy of scattered people reclaiming their original identity. The linguistic proof is irrefutable. The archival documentation is slowly surfacing. The narrative has shifted. The challenge to the world is simple. Can you accept a truth that shatters the comfort of your current identity? Can you accept the overwhelming proof that the first chosen people, the people exiled to Persia, were black, as evidenced by the linguistics, the surrounding civilizations, and the records preserved by their African counterparts? The vaults are open. The scrolls are speaking. And the truth is finally coming to light. We've walked through the exile evidence from Persia, shattered the linguistic barrier with the Cushitic Hebrew connection, and exposed the political purge of the Book of Enoch. The evidence is overwhelming. Now, it's time to choose. Are you going to stick with the comfortable, sanitized, whitewashed narrative? Or are you going to embrace the documented, scholarly, and frankly explosive truth? I want to know what you think. Which piece of evidence, the Persian tax scrolls confirming appearance, the Guizi language root, or the Enochian timeline, was the most undeniable proof for you? Drop a comment below and let the world know the truth cannot be suppressed. If this evidence shocked you, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell.